His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Nigeria, I wish to recognize you, sir, and I now wish to invite you to address the House.
Thank you. His Excellency, President Jacob Zuma, President of the Republic of South Africa, the Right Honorable Speaker of this great Parliament, the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Your Excellencies, the Executive Governors from Nigeria that are here with us, members of this distinguished Parliament, Honorable Ministers, members of the Diplomatic Corps, captains of industry, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. May I use this unique opportunity to say how delighted my delegation and I have been since our arrival in South Africa. I'm also deeply appreciative of the warm hospitality and reception accorded to us. This is also evident in the manner the leadership of the Parliament has received us this afternoon. All of these are consistent with the well-known South African hospitality. I wish particularly to thank my brother, President Jacob Zuma, for extending the invitation to me to pay this state visit to South Africa. Mr. Speaker, distinguished parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed a great honor to be given the opportunity to address this joint city of members of this august body, the South African Parliament. As the arm of government charged with the important responsibility of making laws for the good order and governance of South Africa, the role of Parliament is crucial for the progress of this country and the welfare of its people. Harmonious relationship between all the three arms of government, especially between the legislative and executive arms, is imperative for the objective of good governance and national progress. We in Nigeria are delighted to know that both the executive and the legislature in South Africa have forged a strong bond for the people's benefit. It's an example that is worthy of emulation by some other countries where the doctrine of the separation of powers and cordial intergovernmental relations still remain a noticed challenge. At this forum, it's only proper that we acknowledge and pay tribute to those who made the freedom and democracy which our two countries enjoy today possible. Generations of young Africans grew up in the last 50 years to witness and study the singular and collective heroism, as well as the inspirational examples of many icons of the South African anti-apartheid struggle. Among them are Chief Albert Luthuli, Walter Sisulu, the Madiba, President Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, Govan Mbeki, Steve Biko, Chris Hani, and other men and women of valor and integrity who were imbued with the spirit of sacrifice, patriotism, and devotion to the common good. This new rainbow nation, where freedom and equality are now established as inviolable principles of the product of their vision and dedication. Similarly, in Nigeria, our people will forever remember the efforts and contributions of Dr. Herbert Macaulay, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, Sir Ahmadu Bello, Ernest Ikoli, Margaret Ekpo, and many others who fought hard to secure Nigeria's independence from divisive colonial rule. These men and women in our two countries paved the way for the freedom we enjoy today. The people's liberty was well fought for and earned. The huge debt that we owe the heroes of our history is not to be complacent with the freedom of our people and the democracy that we have established. We can stand on the shoulders of the icons of our history. In so doing, we will be able to look much further into the future. But this also comes with a responsibility and a duty, the duty to ensure that as leaders in Africa today, we also leave worthy legacies for successor generations. Mr. Speaker, distinguished parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen, 22 years ago, Africa's living legend, President Nelson Mandela, was released from prison. Since then, this country has traveled more steadily on a path of progress and growth in stature. We do not only have a new South Africa under majority rule, its institutions and processes have become inclusive. A new generation has emerged that is fired by a sense of unalloyed patriotism and common destiny. Here we are today with the head of a state of another African country addressing the joint sitting of the parliament of a free, independent, and democratic South Africa that has assumed its rightful place in the Committee of Nations. We have arrived at such a moment as this because the people of South Africa never gave up their belief in the rightness of their cause in their quest for freedom and equality. The peoples of Africa and the rest of the democratic world did not also relent in the support they gave to the people of South Africa to remove the shackles of racism, apartheid, and colonialism, which combined to hold them down for so long. The role played by individual nations, including my country, Nigeria, in the struggle for the emergence of a new South Africa that is non-racial, independent, and democratic is already part of the special linkages between our two countries. In those dark seasons, Nigerians stood by their South African brothers and sisters because we shared their pains and concerns. Today, we also stand shoulder to shoulder with you as brothers and sisters and as partners, working together in pursuit of mutually beneficial interests. Suffice it to say that throughout the long-drawn anti-apartheid struggle, although we are not geographically contiguous, Nigeria was nevertheless considered a frontline state by the sheer facts of our commitment to the just struggle for freedom in South Africa. It's important to recall that this was a cause every Nigerian was committed to, not just those in government, but the people themselves. It was for this reason the South African Relief Fund was created. This was funded with deductions from the salary of every Nigerian worker, irrespective of rank, both in the public and private sectors, as well as donations from ordinary Nigerians in all walks of life, including students. This fund was placed at the disposal of the liberation struggle. Nigeria provided scholarships for students from South Africa. Our musicians waxed albums in support of the anti-apartheid struggle. A memorable one in this respect, one that I always remember, is the one by late Sonny Okomsu with the caption, "Fire in Soweto." For those who listen to that music, some clauses could always be reoccurring, and you will be remembering, "Fire in Soweto, burning all my people. Rebel in Zimbabwe, victimizing my people. Look at them shooting, my people are dying." Now go on and say, the color of God is neither black nor white. And the conclusion or the chorus was that we have a reason. Freedom is our goal. Back home in Nigeria, I remember vividly, even as students, when that song, that music is played, and when you talk about freedom is our goal, the Nigerian students will be jumping to the skies, to see if they can join their South African brothers and sisters to make sure that apartheid collapsed. Our poets wrote protest literature denouncing man's inhumanity to man. Whenever South Africans protested against injustice, Nigerian students also took to the streets in support and solidarity. At the international level, Nigeria gave leadership at the United Nations, the Organization of African Unity, as it then was, the Commonwealth, and several other fora in the fight against apartheid. For instance, we chaired the United Nations Special Committee Against Apartheid for the most of its existence. We spearheaded the boycott of the Commonwealth Games. We nationalized the assets of the British Petroleum and kept away from our borders those who had dealings with the then racist minority regime in South Africa, all in the cause of the fight against apartheid and minority rule. Your struggle was our struggle. Your pain was our pain. And today, your freedom is our freedom. Mr. Speaker, distinguished parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen, South Africa and Nigeria have been placed by destiny to play a leading role in the emergence of the new Africa, a Renaissance Africa, whose beginnings are already evident. This new Africa will be a democratic, united, and peaceful Africa, and its construction is a challenge of our time. At a time when many developed countries of the world are facing the challenges of economic and financial crisis, including the sovereign debt crisis, Africa's economic growth rate seems to be on the upward trajectory. Today, in the area of governance, the story is also positive. We have many more democratic nations in Africa than at any other time in our history. We have witnessed elected African heads of state and reverting to other elected sets of leaders. In some countries, 2 or 3 sets of leaders have done that, showing that military intervention in the politics of Africa is almost becoming history. But sadly, however, Mr. Speaker, democratic institutions are still weak in many African countries. There are also conflicts and routine violations of the rule of law. These are being addressed by our sub-regional and regional organizations on the basis of commonly agreed peace and security protocols. In addition, African legislatures must see the need to insist on respect for the rule of law and accountability in the conduct of governmental affairs across Africa. More than ever before, we Africans must take our destiny in our hands and make a success of it. At no other time than today should the continent as a whole, and our 2 countries in particular, focus our minds on the nature and direction of this renaissance. On the 25th of this month, Africa will be celebrating the Golden Jubilee of the Organization of African Unity, now the African Union. The major task of the Continental Organization was to liberate the African continent from the vestiges of colonialism, racism, and apartheid. As we take stock of the achievements of our Continental Organization, it is also appropriate that we reflect and decide where our continent should be in the next 50 years. That destination has to be a democratic and united Africa that is at peace with itself and can compete with the rest of the world. Mr. Speaker, distinguished parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen, there is no doubt that in the global scheme of things, Africa has emerged as a new frontier for trade and investment. This provides another opportunity for our continent to embark on the road to economic emancipation now that the political liberation of the continent is almost complete. In the context of this new interest in Africa, it's important that African leadership across the continent recognizes the extra burden of responsibility expected of it to manage the situation in a manner that will be beneficial to our people. There's certainly a lot more that we can do. We must work together to put an end to the exploitation and exploration of Africa's resources for export without any value being added. In this regard, African countries must transform from being primary source of raw materials, either forest produce, agri-products, or mineral, to producers of finished or semi-finished products, so that you can create jobs and increase the resources and create wealth for our people. We must check the loss of Africa's trained manpower to already developed countries. These are the very people we need to scale up our economies, as well as improve our public and social services. We must work together to promote trade and investment among our countries and build transnational infrastructure in such critical sectors as trade, telecommunications, and transportation in order to fast-track the process of people-centered continental integration. We must check the illicit transfer of huge sums of money to the developed world from Africa through sharp practices such as transfer pricing, tax evasion, and corruption, all of which contribute to Africa's economic underperformance. Many African countries are faced with the challenges of terrorism and other acts of violence, which compound security problems across national and regional borders. African leaders, and particularly our parliamentarians, must commit to the plan to check the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. The production, circulation, and use of these arms and weapons pose a serious threat to political stability and the safety and welfare of our people. Our two countries are placed in a unique position to lead all of Africa to the promised land where poverty, inequality, want, disease, communal and interstate conflicts will largely be a thing of the past. South Africa and Nigeria, with our robust economies and large markets, are well placed to accelerate the emergence of this Renaissance Africa. Happily, we already have a mechanism established to drive our bilateral relations in all its ramifications. It is heartening to know that our binational commission, which functions at a very high level, is very, very successful. And we have to commend President Zuma because he was one of the pioneer co-chairs of the binational commission that came into existence in 1999 to 2000 when he was the deputy president of this great country. In this connection, as we continue the implementation of my country's transformation agenda, I am happy to report that the outlook of Nigeria's economy remains positive with strong fundamentals. Even in this challenging global environment, Nigeria's growth rate, which averaged nearly 7% over the past 5 years, is expected to be marginally above 7% throughout the year 2013. This makes Nigeria one of the fastest growing economies in the world. South Africa, as a major investor in the Nigerian economy, is a major beneficiary of this development. South African companies like MTN, Standard Bank, MultiChoice, Multilinks, the Pretoria hotel chains, ShopRite, South African breweries, among others, are actively engaged and are actually thriving in virtually every sector of the Nigerian economy, from telecommunication to power, education, aviation, construction, hospitality, entertainment, and retail trade. Nigerians are also active in the South African economy. Our binational commission must, however, begin to pay careful attention to the need for balance of trade between our two countries in order to make our economies economic interactions truly beneficial to both nations. Mr. Speaker, distinguished parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen, our two countries have not been found wanting, as can be seen in the leadership we are giving to our respective sub-regions, as well as to the continent as a whole. We must realize that we can achieve more acting in concert than acting alone. We in Nigeria are committed to doing more to discharge the responsibilities that Providence has placed on us. I have no doubt that South Africa will also continue to do the same. The same spirit should be adopted in tackling the challenges that face our continent in the international arena. Here, I have in mind the non-representation of Africa in certain organs of the global governance architecture, notably the permanent membership category of the United Nations Security Council. For a start, it is important that we work together to ensure that the reform of the United Nations system is accorded the priority that it deserves and resolved speedily. The commitment of all Africans should be to strengthen Africa's place in the United Nations. It is not a matter of competition, but putting Africa in the best light. And let me use this opportunity to correct a very negative and wrong impression that has been peddled by some sectors, that Nigeria and South Africa are competing to represent Africa and the permanent membership seats of the United Nations. You cannot compete for something that is not existing. I have never seen two women fighting over non-existing husband. The commitment African leaders have is that Africa must be represented. They must give us slots as permanent members of that global body. And if Nigeria and South Africa will not lead that struggle, who else will lead that struggle? So wherever you see President Jonathan or President Zuma talking about the need for Africa to be there, is beyond the interests of Nigeria and South Africa, but that of Africa. As we look into the future, I see grounds for optimism and hope. I see an Africa on the rise, an Africa that is resilient, upbeat, and confident about its capacity to handle its challenges. All we need is to mobilize the required political will and to be relentless in our quest to achieve our collective dreams. Acting together, we have already achieved milestones that some thought impossible, such as ridding our continent of the triple scourges of colonialism, racism, and apartheid. The role of the legislature in helping to bring this about cannot be overemphasized. It is for this reason that I call on you all, distinguished and honorable members of Parliament, to join hands with the executive and the other arm of government, both in this great country and the rest of the continent, to bring about this African renaissance. My presence here today signals a spirit of renewal of our partnership. Together, we will make Africa great. Leadership comes with sacrifices. As leaders in Africa, we must commit ourselves to break down barriers and foster regional trade and integration. We must build stronger and more resilient economies to create jobs and unleash hope for millions of our people. The dark periods are over. A new era has begun. Mr. Speaker, this great rainbow nation of South Africa has bequeathed to humanity a beautiful story of unity in diversity. It is an amazing story of triumph over daunting challenges in very difficult circumstances. by demonstrating to the world that diversity can be a springboard to peaceful coexistence, unity and progress, South Africa and South Africans have reaffirmed that the color of our skin, the language we speak, and our religious beliefs are only accessories to existence, not existence itself. At the core of existence is the dignity of our humanity. Now together we must sing the song of democracy and development so as to defend our dignity, which has come under the assault of deprivation and poverty. Now together we must stand in solidarity for economic and social justice for our people. Together we shall continue to make Africa a land of delight, a land of great hope and glorious aspirations, where dreams come true for us and the generations to come. Mr. Speaker, very distinguished members of Parliament, the words of your national anthem continues to inspire us. Nkosi Sikele Africa. Lord bless Africa. Once more, I am grateful for the opportunity to share these few thoughts with you this afternoon. I thank you.